Hello, everyone. We are live. It seems. I think we're live. We should be live now. So says this thing. Let me. Okay, now we are live. New managing moderators. Oh my God! YouTube has new managing moderators can support your channel in even more ways. How exciting! Shame we don't have any. Close. Go away. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Live, the GMS Magazine podcast. Good to have you there. I am Paco. Yeah, this is a podcast all about board games, role playing games, and the people who make them, specifically the people who make them, and you, the people who watch, because you're amazing. We love you very much indeed. And well, that's my presentation for tonight. Hi, Chris.
Hey, this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. Just checking. Yes, we are live. That's cool.
Yes,
So, anyone
exactly.
has any questions to ask or comment, I am going to take a quick second as you talk to share this on table thread so we can get some people talking. But this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. You can find me on Deus Ex Machina, all the social media stuff, and yeah, let's go for it. What's new with you?
Well, apart from the fact that I have been diagnosed, you know that I had a back problem a little while ago, and I spent 2 weeks in bed, taking every single day a high dose of anti-inflammatory. I don't know how to call them in English. They are the kind of medicines that reduces swelling in the body. So I was having that, and I was having painkillers,
Okay, right.
big painkillers,
Mm.
and I was having an injection in my back every day, injecting me with liquids to reduce the swelling in my back, so the nerve would stop being trapped and I could come back to life, and having diazepam every single
Okay.
day. And I have to
Right.
say one thing: be careful with diazepam because
Okay.
it helps you sleep so well, at least it did me, that it is so tempting to think, oh, I'm going to have a diazepam tonight because I have a bit of a headache. I need to have a good night's sleep. It's like, let's not. Shall we? Let's not get used to having diazepam. It's way too effective. So, people, stay away from diazepam. Seriously, it's very tempting. So anyway, I had that. I recovered. I went to the traumatologist and I had a CAT scan done in my back and some X-rays, and but only on the lower part of my back because the area that was actually painful was the sacroiliac, and that is the coccyx. So basically, just on top of my ass. And it was really bad, really painful. So it so happens that I have some sort of degenerative condition, and my
Oh
back,
no.
yeah, oh yeah, and my back is slowly deteriorating, and it will continue doing so for the rest of my life. It's not severe. That's the not horrible news. But right now, I have, I think they've detected 4 micro hernias, which is very bad. And they detected 3 nerves that are trapped right now. And one of the discs in my spine is inflamed and getting out of place, and another 2 are losing elasticity and height. So I'm also going to get shorter. So
Oh,
that's going to be the rest of my life, and I am going to have
I
to.
think everybody gets shorter as they age anyway.
Well, yeah, I know, but I didn't want to. But anyway, the doctor
Yeah.
has prescribed a corset, which some people said, "Oh, wear a corset, they are horrible." And I said, "But you're a traumatologist." They say, "No, I'm not." I'm fine. Thank you for your advice. Bye. Which I already tried yesterday, and it will be finished next week. So I will be able to stay, on a very dignified pose, thanks to my corset, which I will have to wear while I'm at work. So that is my life now. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Like I said, it's been, I guess, just before we talked about it, there was a lot of a lot of sickness going around. I'm getting board game in the brain, so I'm thinking of board games and not, recent events. But yeah, there's been an illness going around. I'm doing pretty good. I'm writing a screenplay. I just finished. I published an adventure called Invasion Proxy, which is my Ultra Modern books, Ultra Modern 5 and Ultra Modern 5 Redo. Both have 2 included modules, based off of the advice of this new semi partner that I brought on. That I'm actually taking those modules out of Ultra Modern and publishing them separately. So if you have Ultra Modern Redo and you want the adventures in the original Ultra Modern, you can, and vice versa. So the first one went up and is actually selling better than I was expecting. It's actually doing quite well. And so we're going to have the Biohazard, the zombie apocalypse, going up in March, early March, and we'll probably do that every month for the next few months. But they're pretty minor projects because they're already written, and so forth. But then between that, because I have a very big project Amethyst starting up is also in March 1st, I'm going to be writing constantly for the next 4 or 5 months. I'm obligated to write a screenplay, so I've been writing a screenplay. I can't really go into details about it. It is not it is a semi-genre story, but it doesn't present itself as a genre story. It presents itself as a heist story. It's set in '84, and it's not a completely original. I sat down with the producer who threw me the idea. Him and I created the story, and then I wrote the treatment, the beat sheet, and screenplay. So I'm going through the whole process. And the issue for me is that there's racially charged dialogue within the story.
Right.
And that is because it's set in '84, and it deals heavily with the Native or Aboriginal community, whether it be set in either Alaska or in Canada. And there's always been obviously issues, and I always remember the Chris Rock skit on his comedy routine where he talks about the fact that if you're black and you really have an issue with racism, you have nothing on the Native Americans, because it's the amount of racism that's present against the ethnic groups of Native Americans, Aboriginals, First Nations across the world is insane, and it's unfortunate. And when you have locations like in Alaska or in Canada where we have reservations and we have huge communities where there's a massive a clash of cultures between the local Native community and the I would say immigrants, but what they are, just white people coming in. And so this story is a high story, and then there's a First Nations or Aboriginal character on both sides. So there's one who's a thief and one who's a police officer, and they're both dealing with different shades of racism. And I've discovered that when one of the racist characters and one of these Native characters gets into a joust, it's really easy for the Aboriginal character to cut deep into a racist redneck. And it turns out I can find pretty easy insults for them, because very often I go after religion, and there's a lot of clever jokes. Like this one guy, like he's been mocking his Christianity, and the guy punches his Native guy. He looks at the blood and go, "You want to turn this into a drink?" Like it's like literally like really cutting it. He's trying to really provoke him. And I've also made a point of writing the redneck racist as dumb, and the Native original characters as a bit more, way more intelligent. In the case of the thieves, the Aboriginal characters is far superior. He actually wrote the plan that everyone's following. But I also, as a result, have to create racially charged insults. And I find that that's not like difficult or uncomfortable. I just can't think of ones that are interesting because I did not live my life thinking of them. Well, so I'm thinking, like, I'm staring at the screen going, what's he going to say? I literally had to go online and research slurs because I had no idea what the lexicon of slurs would be.
Why don't why don't you ask someone?
I do, and I did. I actually have a few friends in the. Obviously, I have friends that are local, who are First Nations, and then I have people who are part of the Native American community in the States. And so, yeah, I've asked them, and the responses I got, I'm like, oh my God! They're like, I can't put that in. They're like, no, dude, put it in. That's what we get all the time.
Wow.
So it's one of those situations that if someone who's Native is like, yeah, that's what we get. And then when the character counters, you're like, I got to write that down. So the next time somebody comes after me, I can, but it's one of those things where I was writing 10 pages a day. I was really moving. And then I get to the point where there's this racial clash, and I just slam into a brick wall, and I had to research hours upon hours to get this conversation right. And then on top of that, I have a sexist exchange between a man and a woman that are part of the heist, and I'm finding that difficult because I could write her dialogue of shooting him down, but trying to get him to act like a chauvinistic, toxic male, it's difficult for me to do that because I don't actually know how to write that way.
Well, one question for you.
So I had to research it. I went to my wife and said, honey, can you tell me some of the shittiest examples of men that were trying to impress you before hopefully we went out? And she's like, I blocked those from memory. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, it was so bad and so upsetting that I literally cannot remember a single instance of this happening.
Okay, before we continue, a question for you, Jenny, and maybe we can turn that into a bit of conversation because I think this is something that some people might find interesting if they want to write a role playing game, and is that why do you have to include that? I mean, what is it going to contribute to the work that you're doing to have sexist or racist content?
Well, for me, there's a couple of things. Now, generally, like both Amethyst deals with a racial allegory with elves and so forth, but it's not a huge plot point. It pops up a couple of times. The next book, it pops up a lot because we have an allegory for slavery in the story. But that's what Amethyst is. It's always has. There's 100 allegories. It's not just that one. The whole story is setting as allegories of our modern world and the history of humanity. But Affinity doesn't actually have that. So Affinity it has very few elements of that. But once again, I play it off of allegory. When it comes to sexism and toxic males, I generally don't, when I'm writing an original story, I just don't bother creating them. When I wrote Affinity and we had the voice actors doing the preliminary work, one of the female voice actors had asked about whether or not there was content. And I said, I find writing those extremely upsetting, so I'm not going to bother including them because it's not part of what the story is about. So I don't have that. Mm-hmm. But in the situation of this script, I'm adapting a story that's been told to me by somebody who basically says, this character is a bigot. So it's one of those situations where I can understand why including them would be important, because when you're dealing with a North Canadian or Alaskan town where you have a mixed population, as someone who almost moved to Whitehorse, I know that there is a charged divide and racism that exists in these cultures. And I'm living in Prince George, which has a very large Native community. I see it all the time. I see it especially when we were dealing with shoplifters and seeing police and how they respond to a white shoplifter compared to a Native shoplifter, and I can see that. So it's one of those situations that if I don't include that, it seems like I'm being irresponsible and unrealistic.
But that's a different thing altogether, though. And this is, I mean, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to put you off writing whatever it is that you want to write. But what I wonder is, there's a massive difference between adding, one of the characters being racist or sexist to somebody outside the group of characters that make for the bulk of the story. So, for instance, if you wanted to portray racism, and instead of having one of the characters having a police officer being racist toward one of the characters, that I think would show that there is racism in the world in a way that would separate that character enough from the audience and from the experience that you're trying to convey. So it would make the whole thing very clear, but it wouldn't necessarily upset that many people because the character suddenly becomes unlikable. There are many ways to make a character unlikable.
The important thing, I think the important thing of noting is that this character, his person is unliked by everyone. There's not situations where, like, I have these two characters. One, it's a complex character, and I'm also making sure that if he's gonna have some form of redemption arc. The other one, however, is irredeemable, which is the reason why I get to kill him off rather gloriously in about 20 pages. So I have that going for me. But in those situations, I make a point of always noting that I will never write a story, and this is my oath, regardless of how much money Dylan pays me. I will never write a story where I glorify or promote any type of what I consider to be toxic behavior. I'm not going to ever have that as a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're writing, and there's a bunch of examples where we have stories where the characters are really negative, like bad lieutenant or bad Santa or anything, those situations where the main character is unlikable and we're following this person for the whole story. I made a point of ensuring that the main characters of this story, we know who the main characters are, and I'm making sure that we like them. And even the borderline sociopathic leader of this heist group, I even made him redeemable by him not being that type of person. He's a hardliner, but he doesn't care about what you look like. He cares about your skills and your performance. And if you're not skilled to the level he expects, he'll cut you loose. But he doesn't care about, it's kind of those situations where he doesn't care about how much someone makes. He cares about what they make. So it's that type of thing. But it is an unfortunate thing. But once again, when I knew going into the story, dealing with the setting and the timeline, this is the Elsa in the early 80s, I got to throw in a joke, and I'm really proud of this line, and it came out of nowhere. Like I mentioned like 2 months ago when we worked on the story. It was set in 1984, Christmas of 1984, and when this toxic male is getting demasculated from this female who's rejecting him, he makes a comment of just like, "You don't know what you're talking about, lady. I'm as much a red-blooded male American as Rock Hudson."
Okay.
And I'm so freaking happy with that line.
Okay.
Because I know that Rock Hudson didn't come out until mid '85, unfortunately, before his passing. But it was one of those situations like, wow, and I had to do research. Yeah, he was still at the top of his game in '84. He didn't come out as gay until '85, and he died in July of '85. So I'm like, oh my God, I can't. This line fits in perfectly. So I can throw this line, and everyone's like, and the audience, of course, nobody in the story knows the situation, but the audience looking at this and going, and not realizing what this guy has said.
Okay.
And it was one of those situations where I'm a little proud of that line, just because I know it's this guy inadvertently not commenting about his personality without commenting on it directly.
Well, I look forward to reading that story, or maybe watching the.
Well, it's a script,
series.
so let's really hope you get to see it.
That'd be amazing. Okay, what else been going on? Have you been playing anything of note recently?
I have. Okay, have I played anything recently? Well, video games, no, I moved off. We have another game on the sale pile, unfortunately, which I'll talk about. And I played Unlock Star Wars.
Oh, how was that? Because I know that you don't like the Unlock game, so how
I do not like the Unlock, and I still do not like the Unlock. There were some neat ideas. There were some things about this game that...
Where does it go? We have 5 viewers. Hi, viewers. Good to have you there. Say hello. I'm going to say hello to you. Come on.
Everyone was drawn about my...
Sorry.
Unfortunately... toxic subject regarding males. Anyway, so yes, it's got some elements. The Unlock Star Wars has got some really good elements that I like, and there's some interesting ideas that they didn't do before. One of them is that the app actually has interactive elements. There's one point where you have to look through a pair of macro binoculars, and you literally have to put the headset up and then move to see through it. And when there's a radio, you have to call for help. And so you got to punch in this number and literally call for help into your phone. It detects that and it triggers the next scene. But the underlying issue with the game is still there, which means there are too many puzzles that rely on you to look very intently at one card. And once one person's looking intently at one card, everyone just stares at that person because they can't contribute until that specific puzzle is solved. So we're handing this card off, and a lot of times, you play down the cards in one arrangement so that the vast majority of people can read them. But we have 4 people at a table. There's going to be 2 people that are going to be seeing it upside down. So it ends up being really annoying. So the games, I'm sure, are really good for 2 people. But the moment you go above 2, it becomes more of a chore. And the thing is, there's still 2 more adventures in this thing, so we'll see whether or not we continue on. But yeah, it's still showing this weakness. Exit is still the superior product.
Okay.
You?
Well, I haven't been able to play anything this week because I had to go to the orthopedist to check my corsets. But I opened a few days ago, which the video is going to come out very soon. I opened something that really has kind of disappointed me a bit. I love storytelling and story making, and whenever I get the chance to get anything that will help you craft story, I buy it. So deck of cards with prompts or books with adventure seeds, that sort of thing. I really love them. And recently, I have got a few that were very, very good. The Lock Battle Maps. The company makes an absolutely amazing book with over 1,000 encounters that you can group to create adventures and whole campaigns, and it is fantastic. There's another company called Roll and Play that does something similar, but they are a bit more specialized and smaller notepads with character names. There's one that will help you create a world and an adventure, and there's another one that will help you create characters of many different types and classes. And I love that thing. So there is something called Oracle, which I think they have a Kickstarter going now for Oracle decks for character creation. And this box comes with 5 decks, and each deck's gonna help you create a different type of adventure. Now that sounds very good because every deck has a number of cards for the antagonist and the motivations, why is this happening, and where is this happening, and how is this happening. However, and this is where it becomes disappointing for me, when you draw all the cards in order to create your adventure, at the end there is always a but. So the party meets in this place, they get hired by this merchant to obtain this thing that is protected by this creature, but something goes awry. Then you start again with a different deck, and you go to this place where this is happening, so you have to achieve this that is being looked after this other person. But something happens. So there's always a but at absolutely every single plot that you can create with those decks. So when you create an awful lot of those, the bot becomes so predictable that it kind of loses momentum. It loses, I don't know, you cannot keep an adventure fresh if you know that there's always going to be a but.
Yeah.
There isn't a and then, there isn't a and, there's nothing else other than a but. And I found that very disappointing because it doesn't really inspire me to use it, because I know there is always going to be a but. And the rule book, it comes with a little bit of an explanation. It's got more pages showing you stories that have been created with those decks than giving you ideas about how to use those decks to create your own story. So it only gives you one way of using those decks. And yeah, you can mix them, of course. But I thought, I needed something else. Why didn't you lean on? Have the first one of these things I bought is a deck of tarot-sized cards. And the little booklet comes with 7 or 8 different ways to use the tarot cards to generate your story.
Oh.
It is considerably better because you can use different combination of cards to create different combinations of adventures, or different lengths of stories, different type of stories with different focus on the characters or the mission of the character or the meta plot. This thing offers nothing of the like. Not even the basic hero's journey structure, which is so tried. There is no going into different types of literature to find out, going to Asian literature to find out about how are groups organized, what are the mechanics and the dynamics of, for group of people, which is something that we should look into a lot more, since RPGs have a different, dynamic than the stories that you see in film. So I was disappointed by it. It's a beautifully well produced thing, but yeah, I'm not feeling it. Unfortunately, I really am not feeling it. So I'm disappointed.
That's too bad.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the.
And now,
sorry.
I was gonna say, now we're on to another happy topic.
Which one are the two?
Well, I think we should talk about the subject at hand, which is Kickstarters fail. It's part of the risk, and I think we'll talk about generically about what can happen, what people's options are. Mm-hmm. But there are three unfortunate examples of this recently that we'll talk about. One of them is Battlefield, Into the Box, and Holy Grail. Which one do you want to talk about first?
The first one, I don't mind.
Okay, so Battlefield, of course, is that it's the unfortunate news regarding what happened. We had unfortunately we had passing of Jonathan Thompson, who ran the company. Yeah. I only had him on my friends list for a short time. We actually discussed a few things outside of Facebook, but I only added him a couple months ago. And I didn't realize, like, I was friending a bunch of people because after the OGL thing, and then I realized, oh, I know this guy. We've talked. I've backed some of his products. And unfortunately, if you have backed his products and you know the updates, he's had some medical issues as long as 6 months. And we know that he's been off and on. There's been no details on the actual cause, but obviously it's not something that was unexpected because he's been in and out of the hospital for a couple months now.
Yes, he had been in and out. He went in, and to be honest, out of respect for the family, I'm not going to give too many details. But he went in with some sort of infection in the hand.
Yeah.
And he's been coming in and out of hospital ever since.
Yeah.
He deteriorated until, well, he could no longer take it. He was 52 years old.
Very young, in my opinion.
Well, considering that I am 50,
and I'm 40, yeah.
That touches. That really.
As we get older, we get more shocked when people our age or younger pass away.
Especially because, quite frankly, at 50, I know that I'm half a century old, and I genuinely have absolutely no idea how I'm meant to feel about that. I know when I was growing up and I looked at a 50-year-old, I thought, oh my God, you're so old already. And I don't feel any different than I felt when I was 30 or 35. I'm still this silly little me who enjoys his games and likes to enjoy life as much as I possibly can. And I genuinely don't know how I'm meant to feel about being 50, I don't know. So it just doesn't feel like an age where and when anyone should die, especially of natural causes. That should only happen after you reach 80 or 78, at least. So
yeah, and when you think about the fact that, for me, I always look at when I see someone who passes away, and I go, people say, Chris, you have so much life left to you. You have so much time to accomplish your dreams, and I've always felt unfulfilled, and I always push, and I'm obsessed with trying to, be a successful person in the field which I have a passion for, which is writing. And when I was 26, everyone was like, "Get your life ahead of you." Here I am, quarter of a century later, and I'm looking like I haven't. I'm more successful. People know me, but I'm still a person that struggles to survive with that money. And I look at stuff that yeah, we're the same age as, give or take, of like Shaquille O'Neal, and I'm like, look at what that guy accomplished to this point. And then of course I know the fact that there are people younger than me that pass away. Whenever I see someone younger than me that pass away, there's a dark part of me that really hopes it's not natural causes. Like when someone like in their late 20s dies, I'm like, oh, please let it be like drugs, like a celebrity, because I don't want to know that. Oh yeah, no, they got cancer and then they passed away. And I was remembering, just by pure coincidence, yesterday I was watching the comments and somebody brought up Total Biscuit. Do you know who Total Biscuit
I
is?
do not.
Total Biscuit was one of the most well-known video game commentators and reviewers on the internet. He was exceptionally popular. He was very, very popular, and he died at 33 from cancer.
Ouch.
And it sucks when you get stuff like that. And so for the people who are curious, I will mention that there is a GoFundMe page for Jonathan Thompson's funeral. He did not have life insurance. That's something that they fully admitted. And they're facing financial hardship. So you can find Jonathan Thompson's funeral fund. They have a $15,000 goal. Even if you drop a few dollars anonymous, every single dime helps. Don't feel that you have to be the person that drops 100, drop a fiver, drop a toonie, whatever the case may be. Whatever you can spare, anything helps. And even if you can't, share the campaign so maybe other people can. So yeah, it's something, it sucks, but I was thinking of what we talk about, turning that into the situation where Battlefield Press they have run 20 or 30 some Kickstarters in the history of Battlefield Press. And have you backed anything by Battlefield? I have.
I don't. I have, to be honest, I have not, because of shipping costs.
Yeah, mostly he does stuff that's digital. And I will say that his products have never been, like, they're not big budget. He doesn't do big budget campaigns. His last one was literally 51 backers, raised $1,200 and funded for the quintessential fighter. And he also had one that was Blood Shadows Chronicles of Gulf, 136 backers, just under 10,000 Canadian. And a game called Pony Fighter, 70 backers, and so forth. And so these are all campaigns. And then he has a few Book of the Oracle, which canceled. Kaiser's Guide, which also succeeded. Very small campaigns, but he's had a few that did not work. But the one I backed, and so these are all campaigns that have happened between now and the campaign I backed. And what I backed was the Spacecraft 2000 to 2100 AD 40th anniversary reprint. One of these days we'll talk about how important art is for me, and one of the most inspirational books of my entire life was it was a series of books called the TTA books, or the Terran Trade Authority Handbooks. Have you heard of these?
No, I have not.
These are exceptionally, if you want to talk about a cult following, this is the perfect example. A guy named Stuart Cowley he got access to a bunch of sci-fi art. Okay. Not done by the big names like Chris Foss or H.R. Giger, but Angus McKee, Jim Burns, a handful of others. Most of these are covers of sci-fi novels. And he took those and created an entire new mythology that used this artwork. So this is effectively an art book. Every second page is a full page, beautifully rendered, airbrushed piece of artwork. Okay. And then he writes an entire story. Now, the first one was called Spacecraft 2000 to 2100 AD. This book was published in the late 70s. And it talked about the future of humanity, the creation of the warp drive, which would happen, I think, 2 years from now. They are encountering an alien species with Alpha Centauri, and then going to war with the residents of Proxima Centauri. And so the book it only tells you the stories in a third-person perspective. It never tells you a story like John said this, John said that. It's entirely encyclopedic information, with the resource of this book tells you about the ships that served at that time. So there's actually a ton of so it's basically a futuristic past tense encyclopedia. It's implied that this book was written sometime in the late 22nd century or in the early 22nd century, and it talks about the ships that occurred during this war and the civilian ships that occurred. It was popular enough that he made a sequel called Space Wreck, which was a bit more traditional. I had a lot of artwork once again. He made a few more. We'll talk about this in detail just because it's incredibly inspirational. But it's always been difficult to try to continue this franchise because a lot of this artwork was done by people. And he and Stuart Cowley had the rights for this book. And then if you wanted to reprint it, you'd have to find these 12 or 13 artists and reestablish the rights for any of these illustrations. And obviously that was difficult. There was an attempt to republish it by Battlefield, and the images they couldn't get the rights to, they digitally recreated, and the digital recreations weren't particularly good. But finally, a couple of years ago, Jonathan managed to get the rights to do an official reprint, a 40th anniversary reprint where all the original artwork is included. This was also in tying to a role-playing game that was also published. To be honest, I have not seen this role-playing game, and I've not heard good things about it. Apparently, it's not a particularly well-written game. But the 40th anniversary edition, I did back for $95, and it looks like we won't be seeing this product. A few people apparently have gotten them. I've been told that my product has shipped. That was several months, and I'm not expecting to see it. I never saw a tracking notice, so I'm pretty sure that this was not an accurate statement. And there are lots of people asking what's going to happen. And I said, honestly, I said in the comments going, this is the worst way for a Kickstarter to fail. But unfortunately, it can happen. In situations like this, I said, guys, there's nothing we can do. The one thing we're not going to do is go after the estate. They've got enough problems right now. The last thing they want to worry about are this handful, couple hundred Kickstarter backers that feel they got gypped. I go, well, unfortunately, his family are going through a way worse situation than us. I'm out $95. I have blown that money in a casino. So it's one of those risks. And it's a horrible situation. Like if I dropped dead tomorrow, I would have Amethyst would not be able to deliver because no one would be able to write in my absence because they would have no idea where to start.
I think,
and
no, go ahead. No, finish.
And so it's one of those situations where it would be morally wrong for me to go after. So if I was a backer to go after Nicole, my wife, and go, "Hey, where's my books? How are we supposed to get our money back?" And the infrastructure is virtually impossible because in this situation, it would be very, very difficult for someone to grab my infrastructure to find out who the backers are. And of course, money has been spent already. So it would be impossible for people to get full refunds without the people that are hurting the most having to dip into their estate. And that's why it's one of those situations where I say, just give up. Unless a company steps forward to pick up that IP and to ensure the delivery of that product, which we have seen with other productions where the Kickstarter has folded. They've sold the properties to another company, and then they finish the Kickstarter.
But that's a different thing altogether. I mean, one thing that people keep forgetting, and I try to remind myself, very often, and is that Kickstarter is an investment. You're just investing in the people, and even though I know that both legally and ethically, companies and individuals are meant to do everything they can to deliver. Sometimes life happens, and sometimes, unfortunately, death happens. And I'm not going to be the one fighting death. If somebody's died, that as far as I'm concerned, that's it. That is it. And I'm going to say not just the person. I mean, in this particular instance is unfortunately the person behind the company itself. But I have also the experience of my friend Sarah's husband dying when she was trying to fulfill a couple of Kickstarters. And she hasn't been able to do it because going through recovery, it's a full-time job.
Yeah. God forbid something were to happen to someone close to me. I would say, like, guys, I'll get back to this, but I have to deal with some issues. And the thing is, I've had amazing backers, and so I've never had an issue. whenever we've had issues like that pop up. I've always been very, very transparent. I've had a backer die on me. That was troubling once the his wife came out and said he was a backer, he loved your books, and unfortunately he passed away. And that's why before that book he back published, there's a dedication now in that book to him.
That's a beautiful thing to do. So I think that's something that we just need to get to grips with. If somebody has died, just I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how much money you backed. It's nowhere near as valuable as the life that's been lost, especially for the people involved. So that's it. We have somebody asking, just joined, what company folded?
Well, we talked about 3 companies that are folding in different states of chaos.
Yes.
The first one we talked about is Battlefield Press, because its founder, Jonathan, unfortunately passed away from an illness that he's been battling with for several months. And we're all pretty upset about it. I talked to Nicole about it. I didn't know him very well, but the proximity didn't really matter. I knew of him. I'll be honest, because now I have a partner that's helping me facilitate, I reached out to Jonathan's brother and I said, when you're ready to think about this company, and if you're having issues with distribution for your Kickstarter backers, come to me. Let's talk about a way to finish and see about honoring these last projects. I can't really volunteer writing because I don't know what products he has written, but if he has products that are finished and he needs someone to do layout, I can offer that on gratis. If there's a production issue, like with Spacecraft, potentially we could figure out a way of folding that production into another print run that we're doing as a way of completing this production. And especially that one, Spacecraft, I'm very passionate about it. If I can some way to help the estate finish that and continue that legacy. And I think it's important. I think I have talked with his brother, and his brother said that finishing up his dreams is a way of honoring him. And so if we can find a way to do that, I would very much like to. So I told him that when he's ready to talk, reach out to me and let's see what we can do. If I can help, I will.
Well, fingers crossed you can. Okay, so shall we move on, because this is actually this is becoming quite upsetting, because I did know Jonathan.
Yeah, it is, even for me. So like I said, rest in peace, and find the GoFundMe page, folks. Maybe we'll post it in the comments for people to see. Then we have another company, which is the opposite. Instead of sadness, we have rage. We have Into the Box, which is looking like corruption. It's looking like abandonment. We are looking at a public meltdown where the people who make the game are feeling that the person who published the game is holding it ransom. And as a result, and I, of course, once again, I was the person who backed Subterra 2, because Subterra 1 was one of the best games I've ever played. So it's upsetting to see that company fold. And just recently, their website has gone down, has gone dark. So the chances on us receiving that is going to be virtually impossible, even though I've been told that German and French backers have received their game. The chances on the English version reaching backers is slim to none, unfortunately. And like I said, the employees of Into the Box have used the Kickstarter forum to air out their grievances, and some people have commented on how unprofessional that is, regardless of how you feel.
Wait a second, is it Into the Box or Inside the Box?
Inside the box. Inside the box.
Because I was looking for the website and I cannot find it. As in Google is not showing. It's showing all sorts of things, but not a website.
Yeah, so it's likely that Alba, Aquanauts, and Subterra 2 will not finish. And Subterra is one problem. Alba was a huge production. This is one of those situations where I'm curious as to where this mismanagement occurred, because Alba was 10,000 backers at £272,000, which is about $500,000 Canadian. And so we don't know what happened for that to happen, but we're seeing, unfortunately, like we see, unfortunately, whoever this person is, I don't know who it is that's posting this. that like Peter is the guy who owns the company, and so this person made an update on both Alba and the Subterra 2 saying, pay your employees, Peter. And so, like I said, they're airing out their grievances within Kickstarter, which, say what it is. I mean, they're getting their point across, I guess. But unfortunately, yeah, it looks like Into the Box has gone dark. There's probably some legal issues regarding finances and money.
Well, I'm looking at their website is gone.
Yep.
Their Twitter has not been updated since a while ago. I think it is June 2022. That's the last tweet they had, and it's not as if they were very prolific before that. So yeah, inside the box, I don't know exactly what on earth has happened there. And looking at the Facebook page for June 4th, 2022 is the last thing I can see.
Yeah. So for those people joining in, yeah, we're talking about Kickstarter companies that fold and what happens to their Kickstarters. We talked about Battlefield Press. We are now talking about Inside the Box. But yeah, it looks like it's one of those situations that unfortunately happens very often. When a company folds and they have Kickstarters, 9 times out of 10, this occurs where the company goes dark and everyone sits there with their flies open, wondering what's going on, and their hands are open, and there's no answers, there's no communication, and people post threats, legal action, very inflammatory stuff in the community thread, believing that somebody associated with the company is reading them when most likely they're not. Sometimes this occurs because they are scamming people. And sometimes this occurs because the company has folded. There has been situations where the person designing the company who ran the Kickstarter had to tell his backers that the partner took all the money and vanished. One of my friends backed a campaign where this happened. And this person has said, like, I have to now make this game because I'm honor bound to make it, but I've got no money, so you have to wait. And this is something else. So Into the Box is looking closer to that toxic level where the owner has folded, he has stepped away from the company, and is now going dark. Really not the way you want to go, because you'll never be able to return to this field again.
No, I don't think so. I mean, last week we spoke about redemption and how people should be allowed to, make up for their mistakes and come back and pay their debts and come back and rebuild. Not start from where they were, but at the very least be able to rebuild. But if you go dark without fulfilling, then yeah, I don't think there is a space for you anymore. There shouldn't be, to be honest, because why would we ever believe that you're not going to do exactly the same again?
Yeah.
So that wow, that sucks an awful lot. That's really terrible.
Yeah, especially considering it seemed like this company had a lot of promise too. And so we're also scaling up the size of the company. Battlefield Press is kind of like me. We're very small. He obviously had a lot more Kickstarters, campaigns than me, but his were much smaller. Then we get to this company, and they've had a handful of successes, and the company folded. And now we're going to the largest company of this conversation, which also went under, which is Holy Grail. Now, Holy Grail has Rallyman Dirt, Museum Pictura, Museum Deluxe, still to be delivered. There are still people that are waiting on their Rallyman Dirt. First of all, I don't know Holy Grail that well, but I am surprised that the Rallyman Dirt, which was a campaign that started nearly 2.5 years ago, still hasn't finished. So I'm a little surprised by that, because you can buy Rallyman Dirt in the stores, and there are some people that still say they haven't gotten games, which means they are 3 campaigns worth of people with backers that may potentially not receive their rewards.
Well, with Holy Grail Games, I think I mentioned this last week. At the very least, their website is still up, and they do have their statement saying how they're shutting down, they're going into bankruptcy, and they're going to go into the hands of bailiffs who are going to, you know, they're going to try and sell as much of the stock they have so they can pay as many creditors as possible. But they don't know if at some point somebody's going to be able to continue with the projects that were left off. They claim that they were exploring avenues to finish delivering those games, but I don't know how or if they're going to be able to do that. There have been some reasons, and they are very honest about the snowballing delays, increased costs, which I think they've hit absolutely every single person that makes games one way or another, and all the logistical challenges with bottlenecks and everything. So they are quite honest about what has been going on. What, of course, we don't know is the why has that gone on. Has it been because of genuine mistakes, or has it been because sheer incompetence? Has it been because the money's gone where it shouldn't have gone? I don't think there is a way that we are ever gonna be able to find out, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, not a lot of companies are transparent, and once a company goes folds, they are technically not obligated to answer, and in some situations, they're legally bound to not tell people, especially if there are other avenues. Have you ever owned any Holy Grail games?
I don't think so.
I have. I have Rallyman GT, which was the prequel to Rallyman Dirt. I think that's one of the more enjoyable racing games I've seen. There's a lot of games out there are racing games. I like it's a very simple concept, but I love the visuals. I love the design. With Rallyman GT, I had all the expansions as well. And as a lark, I built all of the courses of Formula One in Rallyman GT and took photos of it. And so the campaign was, and the creators were like, well, that's astounding. I didn't realize you could do that. I go, it wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. I think like, some of the ones were especially hard. Monaco was a particularly hard one to do. So if chances are, if this is the same as all of the other video game companies, there's going to be a fire sale for the IPs that they own. So chances are a bunch of other companies will have the option of potentially bidding in an auction to acquire the rights. So this happened very famously with THQ, a video game company, and they had several rights. And one of their biggest games they had was Homeworld, which was picked up by Gearbox, and they bought the rights to that franchise. So chances are, if this is happening, there's going to be an auction, a fire sale, where there'll be the opportunity for other companies to potentially pick up the rights and even like everything. I do believe that if for example, if I dropped 10 grand to Holy Grail and go, I want the rights to Rallyman, they can go, here you go. I go, yeah, I want all the assets. I want all your artwork. I want everything, all your files. Because if I'm buying the rights to that game, I want your assets. Because then I can then spin that, send it right to Magicraft and go, here's a completed game. Give me 5,000 copies. And it'll just be Rallyman Dirt, but it'll have my company's label instead of Holy Grail, and nothing will change. Or maybe I will tweak it out. You never know.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that people can do.
But one thing, though, one thing, and just in case anybody is even considering the possibility of doing that, I bet you anything, and I am not going to go into whether they would be right or wrong to claim that, but I bet you anything that if you got that IP that has not been fulfilled by another company and bought it and had absolutely nothing to do with either the Kickstarter or the company or anything at all, and you just printed it and took it to stores, you will get a huge amount of criticism because you are not fulfilling the Kickstarter and people have already paid for the game. So that yeah. I think that could be a double-edged sword.
You're 100% correct. And for me, though, for example, if I had Rally Mandarius, someone said, "Here you go," and I were to acquire the rights, I would finish the product. I would find out who is missing that product, because at that point, I earn a bunch of new friends. If I picked up that company and say there was 1,000 backers that had received their game, and I go, I'm going to fulfill those backers, because they know I am not obligated to fulfill that Kickstarter. There is no legal thing. And if I do it out of the goodness of my heart to make this group of people happy, I've just picked up 5,000 new friends.
True.
Um,
You would also pick up an awful lot of money that you would have to get out of your pocket somehow and have absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that you were going to have enough sales later on to
oh, yeah,
recoup that
I'd
money.
have to make sure that I had that. So that's why a situation like this, if, say, there were 500 backers, I wouldn't print 500 games. I'd print 5,000 games, send out the 500 to backers, and then dump all the rest in distribution. And considering how cheap these games are to produce, if you have, say, 20% or 10%, or even, let's say, 20% of all the games are being pulled out, given someone else to no financial backing, I could still potentially pull a profit once we look at, depending on the 80% that remains, assuming that there's a demand for it. And I think one of the reasons Holy Grail might have folded is that maybe their games, they had some successful games, but some of them, for example, I can find Rallyman anywhere. Rallyman, I think, is a legit success because you can find Rallyman anywhere because it's a sequel. I have not heard of their other games, because I'm looking at their other games and they seem popular. They've made money, but I've not heard of Encyclopedia. This game called Copan Dominations Museum again, Titan. Um, yeah, see, they did do Rising 5. Rising 5 is a legit good game, and so you can still buy Rising 5. I could definitely see, if I had the money, I would definitely pick up the rights to Rising 5 and Rallyman, because I think that there's actually money. Rising 5 is a legit popular cooperative game. I think Rallyman's a good game. I've not heard of Dominations or Museum, and they have 3 Kickstarters alone, 3 or 4 Kickstarters for just those IPs.
I cannot say I know them either, so I wouldn't. I'm going to reserve my opinion. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say that I would be prepared to believe that what's happened in this particular case has been a mixture of foreseen circumstances and a little bit of incompetence of not being able to deal with those circumstances in the best possible way. Maybe lack of experience, maybe lack of knowledge. I don't know.
Spiraling costs, there's no way of denying spiraling
Yeah,
costs.
and
People, like I
logistic
said,
nightmares. You have experienced that yourself, of things suddenly being stopped in customs and waiting to be shipped outside of China for months on end. So that is a
yeah,
reality.
yeah. The issue is, um, the irony, and people are saying, print more in the States or print more in Europe, use European. I go, the issue is more and more companies inside the logistics area, from China to the customer's hands, there are more fingers in that pot every day. And as a result, the costs of these games are going up. It's becoming more of a logistics nightmare, because the fact that China makes it, and then one shipping company gets money, and then it hits your distributor's border. Then you got to pay for it to cross. Then you got to pay another shipping company to get it to your distributor, and then the distributor charges you for distribution. To the end, the fact that distribution is more expensive than the game you were producing.
Mm.
And that always seems to be messed up to me. The fact that it was cheaper to make the game than to ship the game. And that's why I'm petrified when I see the bill for Affinity's distribution, how bad it's going to be. I know how much Ultramodern cost. Affinity only had a couple more backers, but I have a funny feeling it's going to cost a hell of a lot more. And that worries me a lot.
And maybe that's something that we should explore a little bit. Producing games locally. I know that I have suggested this for role-playing games. For people who have backers in Europe and they still need to ship them from the US, which all of a sudden it means I ain't gonna back your project because, ouch, I've been hit with a $40 bill to ship a $35 book from the United States, which is, yeah, not going to happen again. And I've always said, why don't you find a printer here that you can print, even if it is a small number, like 500 books, which I know that's not necessarily a small number, and just keep it in distribution. And the one consistent reply that I get is, oh, but you may be getting difference in quality.
Oh no, quality that's not even excuse. That's not a good.
Which is a bit, you know what? So effing what? I don't care if the books that you're distributing in the US are of a different quality, whether it is better or worse. I don't care, because I rather get a decent quality, even if it is different book, than nothing at all. Because if I have to pay $40 to have it shipped from the US, I ain't gonna have nothing, because I ain't gonna pay.
It's amazing that people are still paying it. The shipping cost for Affinity was high. It was high at the beginning, and so I was surprised that I still had people backing. The same thing with Amethyst. I mean, I've been seeing shipping prices that are $120 to shipping, and people have paid it. So I'm kind of surprised. Somebody bought at Naramata in Japan, and the shipping cost was $125, and they paid it.
You see,
and they knew it.
And they kudos to them. If they're prepared to do it, kudos. But I'm not. I'd rather that every single RPG out there has a POD, so I can choose to spend my money on a POD.
That's the big difference between role-playing games and board games.
Yeah, you kind of
see board games. I know it's really technically and logistically complex to have multiple producers. Like in my situation, it cost $6,000 to produce the mold for Naramata before they even made the game. And if you have other printers, you're spending that money over and over and over. So that's why for a board game, that's why it gets made in China, because they have all in-house and they ship the games, because producing that same game to get the molds done for in Europe and in the States is a logistics nightmare. It'll be so freaking expensive. But a role-playing book is way different. They're not custom making anything. They're throwing in a PDF and firing out the books off the other side. So in that situation where the prototyping is $100 to $200, maybe my Chinese distributor said, "Do you want a prototype shipped to you? Because it's going to cost you this much." I said yes, and so it was like $500 for the prototype, right? But it didn't have to. And looking at the quality, I'm really that people have been saying, because by the way, at the time of this recording, my backers for Affinity are getting their game as we speak. I really had people posting photos and so forth. So I'm really happy people are getting games. No one has said anything bad, and I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, it doesn't change. But if I had 20,000 backers, 20,000 physical books spread out across all of the world, I can easily see going, okay, so I have 5,000 in the States. I'm going to find one that's 5,000 in the States, and then that one will handle North America or the Americas. Then I have a printer in Germany that's going to handle all of Eurasia. And then if we have, and then we'll do an Asian production. I can justify that because in the long run, it's going to be cheaper shipping for everybody involved, and the logistics will be cheaper for me as well, depending on the logistics company, because that's the other problem. The other issue, of course, is a logistics company might have an upfront cost. For example, Quartermaster Logistics. For a campaign, it can be anywhere from $2,000 and $5,000 to just set up the distribution. And once again, but some of these companies have arms in other countries, and so you don't have to pay that upfront cost in other regions. But some companies don't, and suddenly you're paying a logistics company thousands of dollars to start up distribution in the States, and then you have to do that again in Europe. All right. So for Affinity, because we have about 100 or so backers outside of the States, they're shipping it international. But Quartermaster, at least recently, had an office, GameQuest, in the UK, and so they would dump product in GameQuest, and then GameCast would distribute it. I wouldn't have to pay any extra other than the costs to ship that crate to GameQuest for them to distribute it from their location. So there's a bunch of costs involved. There's actually one of the saving graces also with role-playing games. Kickstarter specifically, is that a large portion of your rewards are digital. Um, I had 1,100 backers for Affinity. 600, less than 600 are getting physical books. In a board game, it's not. It's
No, it's
100%.
is physical, yes.
So the cost for logistics and shipping is so much more, and that's why I was talking with Jonathan Thwaites, who I swear will get on the show, folks. Because we'll talk about this, because I mentioned the fact that his game Stone Saga got launched in the same time as Homeworld, and he's at $1.362 million Canadian. So he's doing very well. But the fact that he had Stars of Icarios make 900,000 and it lost money because of the massive costs for injection molding for all of those minis, and then shipping and distribution to all of those backers. Because once again, you're looking at, 6,000 backers, and you're producing 10,000 games. It's exceedingly expensive.
Agreed. So okay, well, let's hope that Holy Grail Games properties get the treatment that they deserve, and the backers get to see what they paid for. Now, to start wrapping up, something else has happened that I have heard of today, and I don't have too many details, but some allegations have come out against Wormwood Games. Now, Wormwood Games, I'm just taking a look, and they do gaming tables and that,
very well known.
Yeah, that sort of thing. It's an US based company, and there have been allegations of sexual assault within the company. Ooh. And a systematic silencing of anybody who are, and especially the victims, who have spoken up until now. I was looking into this in Twitter soon before I came in. So I don't have all the details, but I have to say, if you are a Wormwood customer or a backer of any of their products or projects, please spend a little bit of time becoming informed, because you may want to reconsider whether you want to give them your money or not. I believe the victims, because that's my default position. Right away. So I am going to believe that something has gone on, but I don't have the details. I only know that at the very least two people have come up with these allegations of different type of mistreatment, and as far as I'm concerned, that warrants a little bit of attention to be paid to this event. So please take a look at this, because you might be interested. I will look into it so we can comment about it next week when we come back.
One place to do that, Fandamentals, not fundamentals, but Fandamentals, has a pretty, Dan Arndt has a pretty extensive coverage of the numerous issues. Wormwood apparently has had a reputation, and there have been other stories about the toxic hierarchy within the company, stories about how they respond on Twitch and on Twitter. And so this sexual assault charge is actually only the recent, and it might be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
These kind of things usually are. It's interesting that whenever something like this happens and these kind of allegations take place, immediately there is a snowball of people saying, hey, you know what, this happened to me as well, I have been there as well, this I had, and this I also had, because perpetrators never strike just the once. This is a behavioral pattern, and it happens again and again and again and again and again, and perpetrators become very, very good at hiding their tracks somehow whether it is behind a facade of charm and niceness, or whether it is a facade of being really intimidating about it and abusing their status, and is like saying, who's going to believe you over me? I am the famous
Yeah.
person here, I am the popular one, I am the one with the company that everybody loves. Why would anybody believe you, puny little human, who've coming out here saying that I groped you or I did whatever it is I did to you? Why would people believe that? So again, perpetrators have a pattern. So when somebody comes out saying this happened to me, uh, don't just listen to that person, which we should, but also listen to anybody else around the company, and keep an eye on what anybody else who worked at the company at the time would say, because the likelihood is that there are other people with the same experiences.
Yeah. For me, like I said, it's one of those situations where and this has happened so many times, the moment we see a story of somebody coming forward and it going viral, it's interesting how it's never isolated.
No.
And once it comes up, suddenly it only takes that one person to stand, and then suddenly there's a bunch of people that follow. And those, because I've only seen maybe one or two situations in consequence culture that where we've had one isolated charge, and then the whole of the community surrounding that person said, "This is fabricated. This is not true." They are so rare that when they happen, I'm like, that was unusual. Most of the time, unfortunately, whenever these things come up, it's the rallying cry for a larger community. There has been a related, for example, Shut Up, Sit Down, one of the most prolific game reviewers on the site.
Yep.
The hierarchy in that company, they formed another YouTube group which does investigative journalism, most specifically within gaming. And I can't remember the name of the channel. It's fantastic. And they just had a large expose on Valve, talking about Valve's issues and their structure and how they work. It's extremely fascinating. I suggest people go out and find it. But yeah, so it's unfortunate, and I've noticed, and then maybe that whenever it's a big company like Steam, like video game companies are huge, and we see this, and we see numerous allegations, Blizzard, Activision, and so forth. In Blizzard, Activision, and with Steam and all these companies, it is a community issue. There are not one person that's being protected. It's dozens of people being protected, if not maybe being hyperbolic, a few people, more than one. That there is this culture within the company that involves the protecting of several people. Within role-playing games, because the companies are so small, it's amazing how it's like where we have this toxic culture with the game company. You go, no, it's all this dude's fault. It's one person that makes it miserable for everybody. And we could sit here and talk about examples that come to our memory immediately, where a game publisher, a role-playing or tabletop game publisher, comes down to one single toxic individual that everyone lets fly. And it's really unfortunate that a large chunk of the community wants to protect this person despite the numerous allegations from the many employees that come forward to call out this person.
Yeah, it does happen, and it will continue to happen. The thing that brings me a little bit of hope, though, is that it actually now happens, because I wonder how many times this situation have been going on in the past, and people have been or didn't have the means or the support to be able to come out and expose them. So I hope sincerely that whenever something like this happens, and I'm sure undoubtedly it will happen in the future again, because we are humans and humans are stupid, I hope that people will have all they need to be able to come out and expose the abusers, so we can weed them out and they can go out, learn from them, so they can make amends. But yeah, Wormwood, look into that one, please, humans, because I think today we're just seeing the ice of the tip of the iceberg.
So. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. And like I said, when you have big companies like that, it's hierarchy, but because they're so huge, somebody has to step forward and try to do damage control. With these smaller companies, once this comes out and we talk about it, so often the company implodes because the toxic person is the only person keeping it together, and it's unfortunate that as a consequence, suddenly these companies explode. And it's unfortunately, but if it does, too bad.
Well, they should.
I would rather a healthy environment.
Fewer
Having a game I
companies.
love is not worth it.
No, fewer companies, better companies, as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, I don't have anything else to talk about this week. Do you?
Just a quick thing. I have this game called Evolution.
Okay.
This is the newest game going to my sell pile. I actually really like Evolution. Just recently, we played it, and my wife wanted to put it on the sell pile because she feels that we've seen everything we need to see playing the game. We played it about 3 or 4 times now. But it was really fascinating too because it's a game where you're creating life, and then you're taking that life to a watering hole so you can feed them, and you want to increase their population because every token of food is a point. And so for the more food tokens, the more points you earn. Now, this same company, like I said, you better like this art style